Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the fascinating science of productivity, focus, and background audio. Because let's be honest, if you've ever wondered why a perfectly curated playlist of lo-fi beats helps you absolutely crush your to-do list, while accidentally leaving a true crime podcast playing completely derails your day, you are in the exact right place. We're going to break down what your brain is literally doing when it processes sound during complex work.
So should deep work happen in silence? It is the ultimate productivity debate, and it's one you've probably had with yourself while staring blankly at a blinking cursor. The internet absolutely loves a strict binary. On one hand, you've got productivity gurus claiming that a very specific 40 Hz binaural beats playlist is the ultimate brain hack. But then, on the other hand, you have purists insisting that true focus requires total monastic silence. Like, you need a sensory deprivation chamber just to write an email. But the scientific reality? It's way more nuanced, and honestly, a whole lot more interesting than just picking sides.
First things first, let's define our ultimate goal here: deep work. Popularized by author and computer science professor Cal Newport, this refers to those long stretches of intensely focused, cognitively demanding effort, completely free from distraction. We aren't talking about blindly clearing out your inbox while half watching a video. No, this is about holding incredibly complex, fragile ideas in your mind to produce high-level results. It's the kind of work that actually moves the needle, and achieving that delicate mental state requires a very specific acoustic environment. Getting into that peak flow state really comes down to one core biological trade-off. Basically, background audio acts either as a protective shield or it acts as a devastating thief. There's a middle path we have to walk here. Depending entirely on what you choose to pump into your ears, sound can significantly lower your mental friction, or it can absolutely hijack your working memory and leave you totally frustrated. So to master your own focus, we need to understand how these two distinct mechanisms are operating inside your brain.
Let's look at sound acting as a shield first. Human attention is biologically hardwired to look out for novelty. It's an ancient survival mechanism, right? Our ancestors really needed to notice the sudden snap of a twig in a quiet forest to avoid, getting eaten. Today, if you're trying to work near unpredictable hallway conversations, sudden traffic, or a dog barking next door, your brain wastes massive amounts of energy constantly assessing every single volume spike to determine if it's a threat. A steady audio bed acts as a shield by masking those noises. It literally raises the baseline of noise to lower the amount of novelty in the room, creating the safe, flat, predictable environment so your attention just stops reacting to every tiny disruption.
But here is the catch. Sound can instantly flip into being a thief when it competes directly with your task. If you're coding, writing, reading, or trying to learn a complex new concept, your brain is relying heavily on its verbal working memory system. And workplace psychology research consistently shows that intelligible speech is the absolute ultimate enemy of knowledge work. If your background audio contains words, bam, it's a thief. It hijacks the exact same cognitive real estate you're trying to use to compose a sentence. That's exactly why you sometimes find yourself accidentally typing the lyrics of the song you're listening to. Your brain just cannot process two streams of verbal information simultaneously without crashing. It really boils down to this. One person can write beautifully with rain sounds, but lose focus instantly when a podcast starts playing. It depends entirely on the audio type and the specific work being done. There is no magical playlist that makes you immune to distraction, especially if that track is actively fighting your brain for verbal processing power. You absolutely have to match the tool to the task.
Section 1. The Mozart Effect Myth.
To figure out how the science of sound and intelligence got so incredibly tangled up in our culture, we actually have to jump back to 1993. Researchers published this very narrow, specific finding, showing that listening to a Mozart sonata gave people a brief, short-term improvement on a specific spatial reasoning task. It was just a fascinating little blip of data. But pop culture took that and ran a marathon with it. By the late 90s, this had morphed into the massive myth that playing classical music literally makes you smarter. People were buying CDs guaranteed to boost their baby's IQ. It took decades to correct this, culminating in a massive 2022 systematic review in the journal Music and Science. That review totally grounded the reality, proving that background music doesn't boost innate intelligence. The effects are actually highly inconsistent and depend entirely on the task and the listener.
So what is actually happening when music feels like it's helping? Well, modern psychology points to the arousal mood explanation. Pleasant background music might make you feel more alert, positive, and emotionally energized. If you're dreading a super tedious data entry task, putting on an upbeat track can elevate your mood just enough to help you power through the boredom.
But crucially, it is not upgrading your brain's hardware. It's regulating your mood, not boosting your intelligence.
Section 2. Matching audio to tasks.
The real secret sauce here is dynamically matching your audio to the specific cognitive demands of whatever you're currently doing. Think of it like pairing a wine with a meal. You wouldn't serve the exact same thing for every single course. If you're doing deep, complex reading, you need silence, or at least a completely non-verbal, steady sound like white noise. Shifting to writing, avoid lyrics at all costs. Go for brown noise, rain, or a soft room tone. Now, if you're doing visual design, admin work, or just cleaning up your desk, that's where music or ASMR truly shines by giving you a steady, upbeat rhythm. And for those highly stressful tasks you keep putting off, calming nature sounds can actively lower your physical body tension just enough to get you started without panicking.
When we compile all these rules together, the ultimate deep work sound profile is actually kind of boring, and that is exactly the point. For maximum focus, your background audio must be safe, extremely predictable, low in information, and emotionally steady. No lyrics, no speech. It should not tell a story or take your brain on a journey. Remember that ancient survival mechanism we talked about? If your audio triggers your orienting response with an unexpected beat drop, sudden volume swell, or dramatic tempo change, it is actively pulling you out of deep work by forcing your brain to assess a new stimulus. I absolutely love this analogy. Good background sound is exactly like good lighting. It supports the work without becoming the work. It should just illuminate your mental workspace so you can see what you're doing without ever drawing your attention up to the fixer itself. If you're constantly noticing the lighting, it's distracting, right? The exact same rule applies to your sound.
Section 3. The Deep Work Test. Okay, enough guessing, and definitely enough trusting whatever random focus playlist and algorithm feeds you today. It is time to be a scientist of your own brain. Try this incredibly revealing 3-day test on a single demanding task. Day 1. Do a session in total uncompromising silence. Day 2. Try a session with a non-verbal, steady sound like rain or brown noise. Day 3. Use music you actually genuinely like. Be brutally honest with yourself here. Track your time on the task, note any major errors, and gauge your mental fatigue at the end of each session. What works best for your brain isn't some mystical secret. It becomes incredibly obvious when you just systematically test it.
The big takeaway here is that deep work isn't about finding one rigid rule and blindly obeying it forever. We're not robots. Sometimes your mind demands absolute silence because the cognitive load of a complex problem is simply too high. Other days, you might desperately need the masking shield of roaring brown noise to block out a chaotic office. It is entirely about adapting to what your unique brain requires in this exact moment, to aggressively protect the conditions your mind needs today.
So as you experiment with your own setup this week and run your deep work test, I want you to ask yourself, is the ultimate productivity hack simply finding a sound so safe, so perfect, and so predictable that it literally vanishes completely from your awareness? Test it out, passionately protect your focus, and see what happens when you finally match your sound